Hey everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobby Capucci, and this is Daily Drop number 14. Today we have an article from the Miami Herald, the paper that started it all with the whole Epstein takedown the second time, and Julie K. Brown is the one who wrote this article, the woman who should get the most credit for bringing this back into the light, and a woman that deserves to be congratulated for her very hard work and her very important work on this subject. So we'll jump right into the article. And like usual, you'll be able to find the link in the description so you can follow the article yourself and take a read. And let's see what you guys think. For 10 years, Courtney Wild waged almost a one-woman crusade against the federal government on behalf of victims of sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, who molested her and countless other underage girls around the country. Some of that time, Wild pursued justice from a putrid Florida state prison cell where she was serving a longer sentence for a drug crime than Epstein, who received a plea deal that allowed him to enjoy his 13-month jail term, mostly from his comforts of his luxurious office in West Palm Beach. Pause. Stop. Like I always talk about, another example of the two-tier justice system. A woman gets arrested for drugs, probably not even trafficking drugs, but for using them, and she gets a longer sentence than a man convicted of what Jeffrey Epstein was convicted of. It's absolutely, positively disgusting that this can go on. But a decade later, Wild's relentless quest has led to a bipartisan push in Congress for sweeping reforms that, among other things, would give judges the power to nullify plea deals that violate the Crime Victims' Rights Act. The Courtney Wild Crime Victims' Rights Reform Act of 2019 was introduced in the U.S. House of Representatives Thursday by Representatives Jackie Speier of California, Scott Perry of Pennsylvania, Louis Frankel of Florida, and Mo Brooks, and is co-sponsored by 9 other representatives from both parties. The legislation, if passed, would strengthen the Crime Victims Act by closing loopholes that federal prosecutors try to exploit to justify giving Epstein one of the most lenient plea deals for a serial child sex offender in history. All right, now, A, why would any congressperson or senator not pass this? And B, why is something like this not into effect as it is? How could these people have loopholes for everything, including the abuse of human beings? Child sex trafficking, women trafficking, they have loopholes for every little thing you can imagine. But yet, you and I, on the other hand, oh boy, let us try and get away with a little something. You want to skimp on your taxes? No way, buddy. Straight to jail. You want to, maybe not pay a parking ticket? Whoa, no way, buddy. You're going to get fined, maybe even end up in jail. Back to the article. The bill would impose discipline and other penalties upon prosecutors who fail to protect crime victims and would also allow victims to obtain up to $15,000 in monetary redress for violations of their CVRA rights. I'm just crying. I don't know what to say, Wild 31 told the Herald. I just know this is my passion. When you want something so badly, you will just fight for it with all your heart. For so long, I wasn't sure anything would happen. I'm just overwhelmed with joy and happiness. I fought for what's right for all crime victims. Wild's attorney, Brad Edwards, said she continued to fight the battle even during her darkest times when she was in jail and overcoming drug addiction. No matter where she was in her life, she was heavily involved in the case. It was the thing to me, in some ways, was the most stabilizing for her, even when her life was kind of falling apart, Edwards said. Speier, who is also a child sexual assault survivor, said she was moved by Wild's story. How, when she was homeless, she and other girls were lured to Epstein's Palm Beach mansion on the pretext that they would be paid to give him massages. The girls, mostly 13 to 16 years old, were abused by Epstein for years. Again, the pattern. Rich people, powerful people, looking for girls from broken homes, from the streets that have nothing, lure them into their disgusting web, and then abuse them. It happens over and 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 over again. And for these people around them to say that they don't see anything, they don't know anything, it's absolutely ludicrous. It's such a joke. Epstein died in August after hanging himself in a New York jail cell while awaiting trial on new federal sexual trafficking charges brought against him earlier this year. It was obvious these victims, who had played by the rules, done everything they were asked to do, provided all the testimony, and were treated like pawns in a battle between the prosecution and defense and discarded, Spears said just before introducing the bill Thursday at the U.S. Capitol. I felt compelled to change the law and give it some teeth so victims' rights were no longer just words on a piece of paper that they have some clout. In the aftermath of Epstein's June 2008 plea hearing, Edwards filed what would become a historic case for crime victims. He and former federal judge Paul Cassell alleged that federal prosecutors, led by then U.S. Attorney Alexandria Acosta, had violated the Crime Victims' Rights Act by forging a secret, non-prosecution agreement designed so no one, including Epstein's victims, would know about the paltry punishment Epstein was given. Why? Why would they sign a deal like this? Why would a federal prosecutor okay a deal like this? Well, if you ask Acosta himself, he told the Trump transition team that he was told that Epstein was above his pay grade and he was told to have his hands off because Epstein was owned by intelligence. Very interesting. Back to the article. For 10 years, Edwards and Cassell filed legal briefs, depositions, and even copies of emails passed between federal prosecutors and Epstein's attorneys, showing that there had been an effort to keep Epstein's victims from learning that the government was negotiating an immunity deal for Epstein. The federal government, meanwhile, filed counterarguments to keep the deal secret and prevent Epstein's victims from nullifying the non-prosecution agreement, which not only granted immunity for Epstein, but also to his co-conspirators. Okay, now, what sort of normal citizen, normal person, you or I, someone you know, someone you come in contact with, someone you've met in your life, gets a deal like this, where not only they get immunity, but everybody around them that might possibly somehow be involved in the case also has immunity? That is incredible. How you work a deal like that is absolutely incredible. And then to add injury to insult, or insult to injury, whichever way you'd like to go, you don't even let the victims know that you're giving this guy a sweetheart deal, that he'll be back out on the streets to continue with his crime spree. It is absolutely, positively disgusting. Back to the article. To Edwards, it was almost as though the government was working on behalf of Epstein and not his victims. I wonder why. The crux of the improvement in the law is that it eliminates the possibility that the government can work in concert with the defendant against the victim, Edwards said. In this case, the government was only communicating with the defendant and his lawyers and not with the victims. It's unfortunate we had to fight for a decade to get some changes, but if it improves things for victims in the future, then it was worth it. In February, U.S. District Court Judge Kenneth A. Mara, in a groundbreaking decision, ruled that prosecutors had violated the CVRA, but he stopped short of voiding the agreement. By then, Epstein had already served his sentence and had returned to his jet-setting life and was dividing his time between his mansion in Manhattan and his private island off the coast of St. Thomas. But in July, the case took another turn when Epstein was arrested on sex trafficking charges brought by Jeffrey Berman, the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York. The 66-year-old money manager was denied bail and ultimately died in his cell. His death was ruled a suicide. Last month, Mara rendered the effort to nullify the agreement moot in the wake of Epstein's death. Edwards and Cassell have appealed the decision. The district's court ruling turned CVRA into a hollow promise for victims and should be overturned, Cassell wrote in an appeal filed earlier this month. Cassell, who helped write the new reform bill, said the measure includes important changes in how the CVR operates, requiring, for example, that the Justice Department provide additional information to crime victims when questions arise about how criminal cases are proceeding. If this new law had been in place, it is clear that Epstein's victims would have had justice by now, Cassell said. The CVRA Reform Act will ensure that the delay and trauma that Epstein's victims suffered during the protracted litigation never happens again. Wow. Wow. Okay, so there's the article from Julie Brown in the Miami Herald, the most important article in the case that has been dropped today, as far as the way we're reporting it here on the show, for sure. By far one of the most important types of articles when it comes, especially from Julie Brown, the lady who broke the whole entire story. Now, the fact that these victims have to appeal the ruling when everybody knows that what happened was ridiculous, and just because Jeffrey, it was convenient that because he's dead all of a sudden that this doesn't go forward, that they have to appeal it. It's just convenient that he happened to die the day after a treasure trove of information was dropped. It's just convenient that guards were supposedly asleep when he was supposedly committed suicide in the MCC. It's just so convenient, and so very convenient for certain people that this all occurred. And it's just so very odd that there's no information coming up. There's no follow-up about the guards who were supposedly subpoenaed that were watching him. There's no information about the cameras. There's no information at all. We have zero information coming from the people who should be giving us this information. Thankfully, there's people like Julie Brown at the Miami Herald who are on top of this story. And I'm thankful for the people that are listening to this podcast, the people that download this podcast, the fans of this podcast, because it's you guys that are keeping this story alive, truly. You guys are the ones that really want truth and justice, and we're the ones who really who are demanding answers in this case, where the legacy media is failing us once again. Thanks for joining me on this daily drop of the Jeffrey Epstein Show. We'll be back at it tomorrow, and I hope to have you guys along for the ride.